It's important to know the law, but how do you know every law? You might know it for the town you live in, but what about the town you're driving to or the city that you're driving to? And today that's what we're talking about with Tony DeFazio of DeFazio and Zeiden here on Your Right to Know. Because there's law where, let's talk about guns, where you could have the gun in your possession here in Dutchess County or the Hudson Valley, but if you drive to the city to go see a show or whatever and you have the gun, then you're in trouble, right?
Yeah, and we get a lot of cases like that that have come out of it. People from up here who have licensed handguns. We're really talking about handguns because in New York, if you're going to be carrying a concealed weapon, you need to have a license for the handgun, pistols, revolvers, and such. And it's defined under the law that if you can get a license through one of these counties, then you have the right to take it throughout New York State, except New York City, because New York City has their own rules and their own licensing. And it may seem odd that you could take it up to the border of New York and that one county will accept other counties' rules up here, but not down there. And that's important because if you take a loaded firearm, a loaded pistol, a loaded revolver, and you take that into New York City, and you do not have a license in New York City, you will be charged with unlawful possession, criminal possession of a weapon, and it could be as high as a second-degree charge. What that means is you could face up to 15 years in prison for doing something which is perfectly fine right in this studio, but is completely illegal in Manhattan. And people don't understand that. A lot of times, this is not necessarily on purpose, people purposely bringing the guns in, but people forget that they leave their guns, they leave them in their bags. I cannot tell you how many cases I've had people walking into airports and they left their gun, their loaded gun, in their bag, and they don't realize until they are walking through the magnometer at the screening, and the officer's like, "What is that in the bag?" And it's like, "Oh, oops, that's my loaded gun that I forgot to leave." Well, you're not getting on your plane, I guarantee you, and they're not letting you take the gun home. You're going to be handcuffed walking out the door. And for somebody who is a licensed gun owner, and you can't have a criminal record up here to get a licensed gun, it's an alarming experience, to say the least. The interesting thing is there are actually rules that are in place that you can bring a gun on a plane, not for yourself, but you can transport guns on a plane if you're getting on the plane. But those rules are very strict, and you have to follow those rules through the websites. If you look up on the Homeland Security website and the TSA website, there's very specific rules. You have to very specifically follow those rules about where you place the gun, where you put the gun, that you notify them when you get there, that you have your license with you. If you don't do all those things, you're getting handcuffed and you're walking out of there and facing a significant amount of time in jail. When Plaxico Burress in 2008 shot himself in the leg, that was one of the first cases of the new law. Up until then, the way the law had been written is if you just had a gun and it was loaded and it was illegal, you were facing what's known as a Class D. D as in David level felony. Most of the time people would get probation for that, but then they increased it without really a lot of thinking about what the consequence was going to be, and now they made it a C felony. The meaning was that immediately you were facing, there was no more probation, you were facing 3.5 years in state prison as a violent felony, which had significant consequences. Plaxico Burress was the first guy that kind of went down on that, and he wound up getting 2 years in prison. So if you're going to own a pistol, and you're going to own a firearm, and you're going to own it up here, you've got to do everything legally. You've really got to know what you're talking about. And there's also an issue about being loaded guns, because the crime becomes from a misdemeanor to possession of a handgun to a felony, and a very serious felony, when the gun is loaded. But just because you don't have bullets in the chamber of the gun or in the stock of the gun doesn't mean that gun's not loaded. When they talk about loaded, they talk about, is the gun and ammunition in close proximity to itself that in essentially a moment's notice, the gun can be loaded. If the gun is sitting in your bed and it's under the mattress, and right next to under the mattress is a box of ammo, well, that's a readily capable loaded handgun, and you're going to be charged as if it's fully loaded. So those are the things you have to understand before you want to buy a gun and take the responsibility of owning a firearm.
All right, so the rule here is don't travel or travel to where you know what the rules are. And if you have a handgun and you're going down to the city, even though you're licensed here, remember that you have it in your bag. But now, let's say the situation is such that you didn't remember, you get arrested, you get handcuffed. What are your rights?
Well, you have all the rights of anyone who's been charged with a crime, and you need to obviously speak to an attorney. And you need to speak to an attorney who knows not just the rules up here, but knows the rules down there. Because it can get ugly down there, and they don't like, but no district attorney in any county in New York State likes it when people commit crimes in their county, obviously, but they really don't like it when people from other counties come in and commit crimes in their county, because they all take the position, I got enough trouble here, I don't need you. So if you go into another county and commit a crime, they really are going to go harder on you than if you were just a local guy who did something stupid. So you got to understand that you're kind of going into the city and you're making trouble down there, and they're going to look at you like some outsider who's making trouble, and you're going to pay the consequences.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks, Tony. That's great advice. Be aware. This is Tony DeFazio from DeFazio and Zeiden, and you're watching Your Right to Know. We'll see you next week.